and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales, a podcast about all things sewing and also what it's really like to run a sewing business. I am Johanna Lundström from The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena and Hjerpe from Hazelhen Patterns.
And in today's episode we're going to have a bit of a battle. The working title for this episode is Knit versus Woven, the battle of the fabrics. So we're definitely going to go deep into this topic and try to figure out what is really the difference between these two fabrics. Can you use a sewing pattern made for wovens for knit fabrics? And what kind of garments should you never use a woven for, or perhaps a knit fabric? And I'm very happy now because Malena, you are the resident expert on all things knit fabric. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts in particular about this topic. But as the resident fabric expert, could you please try to explain what exactly is the difference between woven and knit fabrics to start with, so we can kind of grab our heads around the main difference?
Yeah, so it's basically how they are made. They can be made of the same thing, both can be cotton, both can be wool, but it is how the fabric is constructed. So a woven fabric is it's a weaved fabric with a loom, and you have warp and weft fabric, or that you're weaving the threads together. While on knitted fabric, well, that's knitted, basically. It's created with loops that are joined together, and that creates a more natural stretch in the fabric. Woven can be a little bit stretchy as well. It can be both mechanical stretch, which means it is the actual structure of the woven, like the technique, the woven, how it's woven, that can give it a little bit of stretch, or it could have lycra elastic. But a knitted fabric by itself is always, it has a little bit of a stretch. So that's like the big difference in between them. So yeah, and then of course, I mean, woven, it can be like endless possibilities of how the weave is done, and the same with knitted fabric. There can be so many different structures of knit and different knitting techniques. So but these are like the two main categories that you divide them into.
So the construction is quite different technically, but is there a difference in the feeling and the hand of the fabric as well, would you say, like in general, when it comes to knit versus woven? Or are the individual differences within these categories, are those bigger, or can you actually pinpoint a few things that are different when handling a knit fabric versus a woven fabric?
Yeah, I mean, the difference in between the woven fabrics and within the knitted fabrics, I mean, they can be huge as well. But in general, I would say that knitted fabric, since it's loops created, it gives a little bit more of a 3D structures, while woven can be a little bit more flat. So it can be a little bit thinner, even though it can be a very strong fabric. It can be made thinner, while knitted usually are a little bit thicker. But I mean, now we are comparing like the thickness of two very thin fabrics, but just in general. So knitted fabric can feel a little bit more warm, cozy, compared to a woven fabric that could feel a bit more stiff maybe. So, but that's just generalizing. I mean, a boucle woven fabric is also very fluffy, basically has a very 3D structure. So it can be also have the feeling almost of a knitted fabric. But there are so many. I thought about this, that we have had an episode about what are the different fibers, like cotton, wool, linen, and those kind of things. We have had an episode about the different knitting structures, when we have gone into depth about most of the different knitting fabrics, how they are made, and good and bad things about those fabrics and when to use them. We haven't done about woven knitting, woven the different weaves.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit like, I know from a like, we should do that, an episode about that.
100%.
But there are so many different types of weaves, different like, that would be, it would require a little bit of going back to school, searching like of what all the different weaves are there. What does it mean? Well, yeah.
Yeah, and full disclosure, when we do our podcast, we very much rely on our knowledge and not so much about doing research. So hence why we like to talk about things that we know very well, because I also have this really, because I took a class in textile science at the university. So I have this massive textbook, which is very small letters with not many illustrations. And just the idea of going back to that textbook and trying to pick out the main woven.
Yeah, but I think we should do it. We should do it.
We will do it. Yeah, we will do it. Of course.
Yeah,
no worries,
but maybe
listeners.
not go into all the different types of woven fabric there are and all the different types of weaving structures, because that's not my expertise area. I'm like stumbling also here about the technical terms and what to actually call it, and also like, well, I studied in Swedish, so I know maybe the Swedish term, but I don't know the English term. So woven is not. I worked a lot with woven, but it's not my expertise area, so I'm a little bit reluctant to have this episode, but we definitely, obviously, should, because, we sew a lot with woven fabric, so we need to talk about it.
Totally. And it's also, having that basic understanding between these type of materials is really important, because I think, at least traditionally, a lot of us started with woven fabrics, and then we kind of graduated towards sewing more with knits. So it was definitely a learning curve to understand the properties and the fact that you have some differences between these fabrics. And I guess today, now that knits has become more prevalent, I know, for instance, here in Scandinavia, a lot of people went into sewing by making baby clothes from knit fabrics, and then they went on to sew garments for adults as well. So I guess then the step isn't as big, but I think a lot of us listeners, I know when we look at the statistics, have been sewn for a long time. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you started with woven fabrics. And
that would be interesting to hear, listeners. Please reply to us on either comment here on YouTube or on our Instagram. Like, what do you sew? Do you sew? Because I have a feeling that either you are woven sewers, you only sew with woven and you don't want to go into knitted fabrics, or you sew with knitted fabrics but then you also sew a little bit with woven fabrics. Like if you're a knitted fabric sewer, you do both. This is just a hunch that I have. Like, please, am I right or not? Comment. We like to hear.
Yeah, great idea. And also I will make sure, if you listen to this on Spotify, I'm going to add a poll as well, because we usually try to add a poll every week on the topic that we are talking about in the episode. So check that out as well. You will see the poll when you go to our Stretchy Tales podcast page on Spotify. Yeah, so you're right.
But what do you like to sew with most, woven or knit? Because they are, the sewing is a little bit different when it comes to the different fabrics.
Do you want to? You're asking me now, okay? Because I got kind of stunted by that question because I had to think about it. Honestly,
do you have to pick my favorite baby?
Yeah, I'm like, I can't. It all depends. That's so interesting. This is how I'm gonna put it. I wear a lot of knit garments myself. And that is why I sew a lot of knit garments, because I love to wear them. It's something I gravitate towards a lot, especially knit tops and also like casual pants and things like that, and cardigans. So therefore I would say that I have a tendency of sewing more knit garments, I think, than the average person. But if I'm honest, I will say that a lot of woven projects, they provide with a more interesting sewing challenge, and I also, especially if I'm working with a more stable woven fabric, I do prefer the control that it gives me. So in a way, I would say that I actually prefer to sew with woven garments, sew woven garments, even though I do more knit garments.
Yeah, no, 100%. I could, like, what she said.
Okay.
I agree 100%. Like, yeah, I mean, most of my patterns are for knitted garments. But when you go and then sew, I have the kids' pattern also, a hummingbird blouse and tunic and trousers. When you go and sew some linen fabric, I mean, God, it's just so much easier to sew with woven.
Yeah. I mean, unless
I'm
the woven
rooting
is
for the knitted fabric, but oh my God, it's so much easier to just sew with a plain woven weave, like cotton or
weave
linen.
And,
I mean, it's just like,
they are a dream.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't have any stretch in them. I mean, it's a dream. Obviously, there are some woven fabrics that I like to avoid, like slippery silks, things like that.
Oh yeah,
sure.
no. We're not talking about those here now.
But a stable cotton or linen woven, dream to sew. I have a navy linen fabric now. I'm going to turn into summer pants, and it's going to be so nice because it's going to turn out exactly the way I want it without having to keep controlling anything. I mean, as long as you just make sure that you stable some of the things, because linen have a tendency of growing a little bit if you're not careful. So stay stitching and using interfacing on certain parts. But apart from that, it's so easy. It's so easy.
I mean, unless you sew a lot of seams on the bias, the fabric is not going to stretch out when you sew it. And I think that's the most common issue with knitted fabric, that it stretches when you sew, it can stretch. And that could be such a nightmare sometimes when you do it. While on woven, you don't really have that problem, unless it's a fabric that has a little bit of stretch, usually with cotton, with lycra or elastan or spandex or something, then it can be stretched out a little bit. But here I would do the same thing as you do when you sew with knitted fabrics, like ease up maybe on the pressure, because it probably it's being stretched out because it's too high pressure and the feeding dog underneath is pulling the fabric, so it doesn't flow nicely in the machine. But otherwise, I mean, I don't think that's such a common issue with woven fabrics.
No. Oh, yeah.
A walking foot, I think, would also help, or a Teflon foot, like then the fabric glides more easily through the machine. But it's not. That's not like a common problem. It could also be that the stitch length is a little bit too short, so it's like the feed dogs are pulling like frantically. That could also be an issue, but it's not such a common issue when you sew with woven that it gets stretched out, which is so nice.
It's so nice, and that is probably the biggest learning curve when you go from sewing only woven fabrics on a regular sewing machine and then trying to figure out how to control the fabric and keep it in check when you go over to stretchy fabrics. I mean, of course, there is more some knit fabrics are more prone to stretch, but because of the fantastic nature of the stretch is also what makes it more challenging to sew, for sure. But we should go back to the difference here between the knits and the wovens when it comes to the fabric properties, because when it comes to cutting, there is a few key differences as well. Wouldn't you agree? We have this selvage and the grain line that works a little bit different, right, from knit versus woven.
Yeah, so I mean, woven fabrics, since they are created on a loom, they have two selvage edges, and it's pretty easy to find the grain line then, because that goes parallel along with the selvage edges. While on knitted fabric on jersey, those fabrics are knitted like a tubular on a big cylinder machine, a tubular, and when you knit one row on that, you go one circle around that cylinder, it has actually maybe knitted 24 rows. So then the if it is striped fabric, you can see it's most easily to see this, that if you see the grain line, but then you see the stripes, it is actually slightly tilting because on one circular you have actually knitted several rows. This is to make it speeding up the process of making the fabric. So if it goes faster, it's a little bit cheaper, unfortunately. So yeah, finding the grain line can be a little bit trickier on knitted fabric, and also since it's a tubular, but then when you sell it or buy it in the shops, it is cut open basically. So usually, I mean, in most cases, it is cut along the grain line, because they usually have like technical thing now. When they knit it, they maybe leave one wale unknitted, so that it becomes like a slight gap in the fabric. Then they have like a laser that finds that gap and can cut along that gap. Some cases, not all. But you can't always rely on it has been cutted super straight along that grain line. So the easiest thing on it, I think, is trying to find the grain line yourself, to find like a wale that goes like should go along the selvage edge, but you can't really rely on that. But don't. And here's the problem when then it comes to the fabric, striped fabrics. Like, that is very like visible, but it might not be 100% then along the grain line. But what do you want on your garment? Do you want slightly tilted stripes, or do you want straight looking stripes? I would go with straight looking stripes, otherwise it might look wonky.
Yeah, especially on the sleeves, I think it's gonna look, and also you will have problems aligning, especially if you're sewing like a wide striped tee. You definitely want the stripes to match, and then if you follow the grain line, you won't be able to 100% match them correctly in the side seam as well. Shameless plug, in our book Fit for Knits, we talk about these specific topics, and also we have lots of tips on how to cut knit fabrics over there and figure out the grain line, and also share the tips that Malena just gave you about maybe slightly tilting the pattern. So you have to, if you figure out you have a grain line, then you're going to do a horizontal line as well, perhaps, that you can adjust along the slightly tilted stripes instead, just to make that easier. And I totally agree with you. And knit is a little bit forgiving like that. I mean, even if you don't 100% follow a straight grain line, I in my experience, I have never experienced that, that the fabric has gotten twisted out of shape when you washed it. It's just such a small thing. And it's the same, I've noticed that with prints as well, and because a lot of knit fabrics have surface prints, and again, they don't always 100% follow the grain line, and then you have to figure out which you want to prime. And I always go for the pattern as my guide. Yeah. Because it would look weird otherwise, I think.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. And when you cut out knitted fabric, remember that, I mean, the fabric, if you have a very long fabric, the big pile can't be on the floor stretching out the fabric when you, if you are on a table, because then it will be stretched out, and when you cut it out, it will, the pattern pieces will, or the fabric will shrink a little bit then when it gets unstretched. So just make sure that the fabric is relaxed when it lays on the table. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with too short garment.
Totally. So there's definitely a little bit, because if you have a woven fabric, you can usually roll it up or let it hang a little bit, or maybe put a chair or something like that if you're cutting on a table, just to keep it up. But as you say, stretch fabric, as soon as it gets a little bit weighted down, it's going to be so distorted. And another thing is that you have to make sure also that you cut it straight, and make sure, how shall I put this? I lost my kind of train of thoughts here, but when you're cutting knit fabrics, at least my opinion is that you should overpin it, because it can again get a little bit twisted and bent out of shape if you stretch it out. So you have to be a little bit careful, be, how shall I say it, moderate with the pinning. Would you agree? And I personally use fabric weights instead, because I find that helps it to lie flat. But if you pin it too much, it might also stretch out the fabric and distort it a little bit, especially on stretchier fabrics.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's I mean, I usually just pin like basically the corners and maybe one pin in between if it's the long side seam or something. Depends, I mean, obviously what you are sewing, but yeah, it's a good thing. Good point.
And a question that we have gotten asked several times is, can you use a fabric for knit garments on a stretchy woven fabric?
I mean, yes and no. There are the general no. You shouldn't it's not a good idea to go for a completely different fabric than what the pattern is designed for. But this really depends on what kind of style it is, what kind of fit it is, what kind of fabric it is recommended for. For example, your vide trousers, vide pants, they are made for a knitted fabric, an interlock.
Yep.
And interlocks they don't have like that much stretch in it, even though it is a knitted fabric. So in that case, I mean, and they are also not like super tight. They are a pull-on trousers. So if you have a woven fabric that has quite a lot of stretch in it, I think it would work. I think it would work really fine, to be honest. As long as the woven fabric has stretch in it. I mean, the extended measurement on the fabric, like if you have 10 centimeters, 2 inches or something, and pull it and see how much you can stretch it out. I mean, not pull by all the force you have, but, you know, comfortable stretch. If it is similar, yeah, no problem. And also, I mean, knitted garments sometimes can be very oversized. Sure, I mean, then you have a lot of plus ease, like the garment is going to be bigger compared to your body. Then also it might work fine to switch to a woven fabric. Just make sure that the neckline is usually on knitted fabric, like it's stretched out a little bit when you pull it over your head. So just make sure that the neckline is big enough if you change it to woven. So I mean, it's not a hard no. Like, yeah, some cases it definitely you can switch it out, or vice versa. For example, if you have a more structured jacket or something, and you use a ponte di Roma instead. Did I say interlock, by the way, on your vide trousers?
Yeah, double knit you meant. Yeah.
Double knit, yeah, I mean,
double
I
knit,
meant ponte di Roma or something like that.
The interlock is quite stretchy, so yeah, it has a tendency of growing.
Yeah, no, the interlock, I mean, that can stretch, that's like
but
super soft fabric. No, sorry, ponte di Roma.
Yeah. I was like... But then it was like banging in the background, so I had to put out the mic because I have so that's why I couldn't interrupt you. But yeah, for sure, double knit fabric, ponte di Roma, those are the similar, same type of.
Yeah, a bit sturdier, like thicker fabric.
Thicker fabric, and sometimes it can almost feel also, like stretch woven. I mean, sometimes you can find these kind of garments in the shop. At least they've gotten a bit quite popular in Sweden in the last few years, where they have this really stable ponte di Roma that I would say for the unexperienced would definitely feel very similar to a pair of stretch woven fabrics, because it's so stiff. So it's more a technical thing rather than a properties thing. They are very similar in the hand and the stretchiness.
Yeah, so those kind of fabric, I mean, you could use, even if it's a knitted fabric, you could use woven patterns for it, because it has kind of the similar qualities. So it really depends on what kind of project you have and what kind of fabric you have. But I've had cases where someone has sewn, it should be a woven dress, had sewn a toile in like a really heavy, drapey, viscose knitted fabric. And like also like almost a very like big garment, like longer dress, and the weight of that heavy viscose is just gonna pull it out. You're not gonna get a proper view of like how the fitting is actually gonna be. So if you are making a toile or prototype, like always use some similar fabric to it, so it has like the same properties. Otherwise you're not gonna get a good view of it. Yeah, I very much agree. And I should also bring a couple of points back where you said
you could use a fabric, a pattern for a more stable knit garment. You could use a woven. I guess one point as well, which you didn't mention, but it's the sleeves. I mean, normally with the woven pattern, there is usually a slight ease, where it's a little bit extra length in the sleeve cap, where we ease that in. And on knit sleeves, if they're done right, they should have the same or slightly less ease. So I guess that would be a thing that you might need to be observant about and measure the seam line on the armhole and the sleeve cap to make sure that there is enough ease, because that could potentially cause some issues when you're sewing a woven garment made for knit fabric.
Yeah, that's a good point. And usually, I mean, on even though if it's a knitted fabric, it might be actually, if it's more for Ponte de Roma, those kind of fabric, it might actually be that the armhole and sleeve head are matching already, because it is a little bit different compared to a single jersey t-shirt. But yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And it might not be so, like, how to say, visible, but for a more tight-fitted garment, especially with sleeves, I mean, since you move your arms so much, that stretch in the fabric is so vital, like you have to have it. So if you switch to a woven fabric that has a little bit of stretch, like it might not actually be enough to be able to move your arms to reach your arm forward. It might be too tight over the back, for example, then. Yeah. So, I mean, be careful. I'm not saying no, like, yes, you can, but you need to know what you are doing before you go ahead. I mean, you can always try, but be cautious.
Yeah, because the sleeve thing is definitely a thing. And I could see, for instance, you say one woven fabric that is very similar to knit that you mentioned is boucle, and also some jacquard woven type of fabrics. They are very similar. So I think, for instance, my AV cardigan pattern, because it has a decent amount of ease, so it can be sewn with a stiff knit fabric. I think that could be one of those patterns that would work well. If you want to do like a Chanel style jacket in boucle, you could definitely pull it off. But of course, I haven't tried this myself, so I'm not sure about the sleeves, if that would need some extra ease. But apart from that, it could definitely work, because I've sewn it in some very stable knit fabrics that hardly have any type of stretch, and that worked really well.
Yeah, I think that could totally work with woven fabric as well, as long as it has a little bit stretch. And maybe, you want to add a little bit both height and a little bit width to the sleeve head, just so you will have a positive ease on the sleeve head, just to give it a little bit of extra room. But I think that would be beautiful in a woven fabric.
And because now that I think about it, I would actually, speaking about my sewing patterns, as you said, you mentioned the Vide patterns, and I think those could be actually done in a very stretchy woven fabric, especially if it's not too heavyweight. I think they could do.
Yeah,
they could work. And
yeah.
I'm going to try to do that, actually.
Yeah.
We'll report back. Stay tuned. Another thing I should mention, when we spoke about, using a pattern for a woven garment, sewing with knits. Another thing is good to keep in mind is that, as you mentioned, with the dress when it was supposed to be woven, and so some details are also going to be harder to pull off. For instance, I just got a question. Someone emailed me and asked about adding a patch pocket on leggings, and I kind of advised against it, because as we know, when we sew leggings, they always have negative ease, so the actual garment is always smaller than your body, and then it's stretched out, and it's usually have lots of like four-way stretch. It stretches in every direction, and trying to top stitch a patch pocket using, as you say, stretchy rayon or a stretchy functional fabric, it's going to be quite difficult. So I would also say that if you want to try to do a woven, a knit, a knit garment using a pattern made for woven, I think you should also perhaps pick a rather simple style that doesn't have too many, unless it's a very stable knit fabric. So for instance, if you sewing a jacket could be made, a woven jacket could be made in knit fabrics, but you have to think a little bit about those things too. It's going to be a little bit more challenging with pockets and colors, things like that. It's not the same thing.
No,
color stand is going to be tricky too as well.
Yeah, those kind of details are more woven type garment. You can do it on knitted fabrics, but it's gonna be tricky. It is not as easy to do, especially if you are sewing on a overlocker. You can't. I mean, on a regular sewing machine, you can do 90 degrees corners. You can do very sharp corners, like in one go, because you can lift up the foot and just turn the fabric while the needle is down. Like, you can do that. You can't do those things on an overlocker. Like, just taking rounded corners, sharp rounded corners can be tricky. You can, of course, I mean, sew one seam and then pull it away and sew the other seam, then you get a sharp 90 degrees corner. But it is those details are a little bit tricky to get nice on with jersey fabric. Also, since it stretches out a little bit, like it's not really. It is tricky. And also, as I said, like, usually knitted fabrics are a little bit thicker. It might not be so visible, but when you do these kind of details, then it kind of becomes very visible. Yeah. Because the seam allowance, it just creates so much extra bulk. So it is tricky. You can, of course, have pockets on a pair of leggings, no problems. But you need to, rather than like insert it, have like a, how do you say, a panel side
exactly
seams, and like insert it in that panel, so when you sew that side seam, it is like integrated into the seam. Right. Then you can do it, no problems. But to make a patch on top, sure, if you are using like a wide zigzag, you can do it, but I don't think that's going to be so pretty, maybe.
No, it's almost impossible.
Straight seam, like a straight stitch. You have to have an elastic seam. Of course, there are like beautiful, different kind of elastic seams as well, but it is tricky, and the fabric might get stretched out a little bit when you do that. So, it is a little bit tricky doing woven details with a knitted fabric.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this. I tried many years ago. I was slightly into tennis. I tried it for a couple of years, and then I was going to sew a tennis skirt, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a shirt, and then are like short leggings underneath. And I used a quick sew, which was I don't think they do patterns anymore, but it was a really great, very early, nice knit fabric, mostly sewing pattern company from the US, and they had this patch pocket. And I think, because I was trying to sew them with a slightly stretchy functional fabric, and I think the original design was probably made for more of a stable piqué fabric or something like that, because even though but even back then I was pretty proficient with sewing, because there's a pocket for the tennis balls, right? And I tried, and I basically just ruined the fabric. And of course, if the problem is with these kind of fabrics, which happened to me then, that I tried to sew the patch pocket according to instructions. It got stretched out and a little bit wobbly despite using zigzag stitching. And then when I tried to rip it, of course, I damaged the fabric. So yeah, it's not the most easiest thing to do. You have big risk of, unfortunately, almost ruining your project if it doesn't turn out. And you can't interface it either, because you definitely don't want interfacing on the inside of a pocket either. I mean, the entire pocket.
No, because you want the garment to like stretch equally all over.
Exactly.
And then if you have a patch pocket that is stabilized sewn beautifully, maybe the sewing is perfect, but then since all the fabric is stretched out all over, that patch pocket is gonna not stretch out as much, so it will be drag lines towards that patch pocket, basically. So it is a little bit tricky. I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, I do most patterns for knitted garments, but it is so nice to. I have a pattern that I'm working on, or the pattern Nipita dress that was released with Tauko. I have planned Tauko magazine. I have plans to make that a PDF patterns like for myself as well. And it is just so nice to work sometimes with the woven patterns because you can do details in a totally different way compared to knitted fabrics because you sew it in a different way. So yeah, it is so nice sometimes to actually go back to woven. And you have also a little bit more control of the end result, I think. Because, I mean, sure, there can be woven fabrics that are also completely different from each other. They can have different drape, weight, how the fabric is going to react when you wear it. But it not, like, the stretch is still, like, it doesn't have any stretch, like, or maybe a little bit won't hurt. But, like, you are more in control if I make this pattern, this fit, the end result for the customer, it is going to be more or less as I have intended it. While on a knitted fabric, a pattern for that one, especially if it has negative ease, then it is more like you need to use this kind of fabric. If you are choosing a different kind of fabric, the fit might be completely off. It might be like, if it is very like a tight-fitted t-shirt, and if you use a wrong fabric that doesn't have like that much stretch, it is a little bit thicker, maybe it's 100% cotton and it's a little bit stiff cotton as well, the garment might feel 2 sizes too small. And it might not have to do anything with, like, if you just have chosen the right fabric, the fit might have been nice. So it's not, it's just so much more difficult to, since you can't control the fabric, like the fabric that they are going to choose. So it's really like you have to explain like what kind of fabric, because it's really crucial that they use the right amount of stretch in the fabric. So in that sense, it's kind of nice to sometimes do woven patterns, because the end result is a little bit more guaranteed, like how it's going to turn out. So but yeah, it's then again, having knitted fabric, the stretch, I mean, it's comfort. It is good. It is more forgiving with the fitting. So yeah, that's a big pro for the knitted patterns.
Definitely, it's much more forgiving in that way. And I should also mention that if you want to learn more about knit fabrics and the different properties and suitable projects, we have an episode, Knit Fabrics Explain How to Pick the Right One, episode 55. You can go back where we talk more in depth about this, and we're definitely going to do a follow-up episode about this, picking the right fabrics for knit, because there's so many nuances that goes into that. So again, you have to read the pattern instruction carefully, and hopefully the creator of the sewing pattern has been quite specific on both the type of knit fabrics and the amount of stretch, so that you have an understanding also the weight of the fabric again. Is very important to get the right one. But that's probably one. But you did mention why also I love wearing knit fabrics, because it's so forgiving, and also if your body expands a little bit, you have much more room to grow, so to speak, in a knit fabric, in a knit garment, unless it turns out that I can't wear this anymore. So it's no wonder that knit fabrics has become so popular in our society.
Yeah, I mean, it's so comfortable to wear. Yeah. I mean, whether you sewn the garment or bought it, like, it is comfortable to have knitted a jersey t-shirt. It is so much more comfortable. Nothing beats that. And also we forgot to mention another thing as well, a pro on the knit side. I mean, we all know that Malena loves to press during sewing, but I'm not as sure that she loves to iron all her woven garments, or at least I think a lot of people have said that they never they hate ironing, and if you hate ironing, you will definitely love knit garments, because once you've sewn them, you will probably hardly ever have to bring out iron again, which is again a big pro with knit fabrics. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'm preaching about pressing as long as you, along as you sew, so you get a nice, crisp finish on your garment. But after it's done, no, I never iron my garments. Like I don't have it at home. We don't even have it. Like it's in the studio.
Oh, so you don't have an iron in your house?
No, we don't.
Wow,
I mean, if there is some
reveal.
special occasion, then we bring it back. So I mean, we can easily go get it. But yeah, no. And I mean, then when I do the laundry, I always, if I have like for example, my husband's shirt or something for me as well. I mean, I'm so particular with how I hang the garment. I hang dry most of my garments. So then if you do it nicely, stretch it out, when it dries, it stays nice basically. Then if you have it crumbled up in I mean, obviously you're gonna need to iron it later on, but as long as you have shirts on the hanger properly, you don't need to iron it. There I'm like, nah, whatever.
That's so. I'm very. I am actually. I love. I wouldn't say I love ironing, but I do like the look of a freshly ironed clothes. So I do have one iron in my studio, and then I have like a big pressing station type of iron at home, which kind of kills all wrinkles just with the press of the button. So yeah, I am definitely. But what I do is that I put on the television. That's my hack of making it somewhat more pleasurable. But yeah, so again, I think knit fabrics, I don't think we will stop wearing them or sewing them for sure. Because when we talk about, actually, apart from the fact that it's more difficult to control, there are tons and tons of pros. One con I would say with knit versus woven fabric is that sometimes the durability of a knit fabric, the life cycle, the lifetime of a knit fabric is unfortunately sometimes a little bit shorter or compared to a lot of woven fabrics. Wouldn't you agree with me? And why is the reason why knit fabrics tends to be a little bit more fragile?
Yeah, good point. I'm not really sure. No, I'm guessing a little bit here now. But one thing could be, I mean, the softer the fabric, the more easier it is gonna be like worn out, like you wear it so much that it actually breaks. It could be something, no, I'm really guessing, that when you make the fiber, or like when the fiber is made into threads that are then later either woven or knitted, if you want to have a soft fabric, you obviously also need to have a little bit softer fibers. So maybe the thread are spun a little bit, not as much on this for the ones that are gonna be like softer fabrics. That could also, the more sturdier it is, the more durable it is. So that could be a thing, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and another thing also which pertains to this is the pilling. Yeah, the pilling is a common problem on knit fabrics, and it's not really as much. It is. I would say the only woven fabrics that I would say are prone to pilling is wool fabrics. In my experience, they do tend to pill, especially if they're mixed with some polyester or nylon. But apart from that, I mean, a cotton woven fabric, I don't think I've seen any obvious pilling. But when you're sewing knit garments, you have the risk of having pilling coming up in this issue after a while with wear and tear. I think it has to do with how it is actually constructed, and like the thread. It's I'm thinking that I'm not 100% sure about that actually. It's a good interesting point. If anyone has any insight on this, let us know. It would be interesting to hear. But one thing also, I mean, we have talked, the stretch is amazing. It comes for,
if you're new to sewing and fitting, I mean, obviously is a huge part of it, and there are some types of garments that maybe like don't do this as a first project because the most difficult thing to fit is, I think, woven garments that are very close to your body fitting. For example, a shirt that is very tailored, very shaped, and just has a little bit like 4 centimeters plus is like the finished chest measurement is going to be like 2 or 4 centimeters bigger compared to your body. This is very tight, so you need to have a little bit of stretch fabric to be able to do this. But I mean, on a tight fitted shirt, totally possible. But then the fitting needs to be like spot on to be fitting nicely, because there is no room to give. Like it needs to be so the fit. It's going to demand a lot more on your fitting than to make it look nice. For example, or compared to if you have an oversized shirt, then it is not going to be that big of a difference if the garment is like a little bit bigger, smaller. It is still oversized. So then you have a little bit more of room of forgiveness with the fitting. Same thing with knitted fabric. I mean, since it is stretching, if it's really stretchy fabric, if it's 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, plus minus 1 inch here and there, like the fabric is going to make up for it. So that's why it's a little bit easier to fit knitted garments, because the fabric stretches. So if you're new to sewing, maybe not do a really tight fitted woven garment as your first garment. Also trousers, I mean, there is so little room of, if it's a little bit too small, a little bit too big, you are gonna notice it. So those particular types of garments are the most challenging when it comes to the fit. So maybe not start there.
Now, great point of view. And also to finish off this episode, do you have any recommendations for good starting projects if you're new to sewing with knits and want to try that out?
I think try basic garments. I have the Hazelhen t-shirt, field felt joggers, like those really easy technical things, like start easy. And I mean, your patterns, it is also actually quite easy sewing. It's even though you have a little bit more details on your garments, they are still very beginner friendly, I would say, don't you?
Yeah, I would definitely say though. I definitely would say that if you're new to sewing, you should definitely have some experience with woven in order to make, I think, my garments in knits. But if you have just a slight experience with sewing with woven, you can definitely do my knit patterns as well, because then it will actually feel like it's easier than compared to a similar woven garment. But yeah, those are very good points. I mean, you can also, if you want to see our patterns, you can check in the show notes where we link, and we also should do a plug for your free Malva t-shirt as well, because that's also a good starting pattern. I just want
to say, I have people reached out to me and say that they have a little bit problem with downloading the file. If you have reached out to me, and I will send the zipped file directly to you. I don't know why this is happening. Like they say when they try to download it that it's not working. I have got that message myself when I tried it. I still was able to download it actually. So I don't know what it is. It's not you, it's something with technical computer, but most people have been able to download it without problems. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it right now. But if you get that, like, just reach out. It's not you, it's probably me. I don't know what it is. I hate these kind of technical things. And it's also like behind the scenes stuff. I mean, we are not, we don't have a support team. We are just us trying to figure out all the things. And sometimes, when we use service and the service isn't working and there's no like straightforward way of
fixing it. So we are all struggling. It's very, especially when there's no specific area where it works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. So
I know that's the most annoying thing because most people have been able to download it, but several people. So it's not you. It's there are a few people that have reached out. So, but just send me a mail and I will send it directly to you then, and you will get it for free when you subscribe to my newsletter. So yeah. Happy to be able to say that because it's always technical things. Damn.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
But I thought this was such a fun episode to do, and hopefully you listeners as well found some new topics. And also don't forget us to tell us what you prefer. Sewing with knits or sewing with wovens, and also check out the poll, or both. Yeah, we're definitely going to have that option in the poll as well, which I'm going to add on Spotify. And also thank you so much for everyone who's also subscribed to our YouTube channel. Remember to check that out as well if you want to see our faces and not just hear our voices. Then you can go over to Stitching Tales Pod on YouTube and to watch the video version, because we released that actually the day before. Our podcast episodes are released on Tuesdays, but the video version is released on Monday. So that's a good little You're going to be in the VIP club if you go subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And you get to see me waving my hands. I talk a lot with my hands when I talk. You can't see it, you can hear that, but hopefully. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to explain things.
Yeah. That's so funny, because my boyfriend, when he checked me out and watched my first YouTube video, was like, "You talk so much with your hands," and I think we're very similar in that way. And then he met my daughter, and he was like, "Yeah, she has the same thing. She talks with her hands." So, and I'm sure
you get your point across much more better when you handle the hand gestures.
So, I'm sure we are more hand speakers out there as well. So. If you want to see Malena's and my hands in motion, definitely don't miss that experience. All right then. If you want to know more about us, you can check us out. I'm over at theloststitch.com, where I have my sewing patterns, and I also have several sewing books and sewing video courses.
And you can find me at hazelhenpatterns.com or at Instagram at Hazelhen Patterns.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.